the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he's my song. And let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he's my song. Yes, you are good. You're good. You are good, you're good.
What this is going to be on our podcast is just a place where you cannot find constant news of the coronavirus, which is fantastic, right? So what we're wanting to do here is provide a place for you to go to where you can just dig into the Word of God. You can take a break from everything else. You can take a break from the hysteria and the anxiety from it. And what you can do is just come in here and look at the practicality of James. And so for you on our live listeners on Instagram Live, we're happy that you're here with us. And we appreciate you, but I'm going to be looking towards our camera here. And our podcast, we don't have a video on that. It's just a podcast. So, digging into James, of course, it's one of the most practical books in the New Testament. A lot of people call it the Proverbs of the New Testament. And James is, it's a pretty cool conversion story. You know, we talk about Paul, and Paul is fantastic, right? Paul is one of the pillars of the church, but so is James. James rejected Jesus. James, the half-brother of Jesus, rejected Jesus until after the resurrection. Now, that's pretty amazing to think that his own brother rejected him. Some that was closest to him, they thought that he was crazy. We see that in, where is it? It's a few of the Gospels that they record James being there with his mother, that they came to a house to come get him because they thought that he was crazy, you know? Well, Jesus appears to James after the resurrection, it says in 1 Corinthians 15:7. And from that point forward, James is an advocate for Jesus. He's a strong advocate for Jesus. He is one of the first Christians. He's there with the Christians in Jerusalem. It says that in Acts 1:13 and 14. He grew to be a figure in the church. And in Acts 15, he is even called a pillar of the church. And that's also said in Galatians 2:9, 14 years later, a pillar of the church. Now imagine rejecting Jesus for so long, rejecting your own brother to be the Messiah for so long, and then coming around and seeing, oh goodness, I was wrong. You can imagine the guilt that I would feel. I have two little brothers. If one of them turned out to be the Messiah, that'd be pretty. I don't think I'd believe it either. You know, I think that a lot of times those closest to us, you don't always see all the time. You don't always see their greatness all the time. And I think that's what happened with Jesus and James. But of course, he thought he was crazy. But James comes around and he goes from being one of those people that rejected Jesus and wanted nothing to do with Jesus except for to just keep him under wraps so that he didn't embarrass the family too much. But he comes around, and after the resurrection, he is an advocate. an advocate for Jesus. And that's a pretty cool conversion story. You know, James wasn't killing any Christians, but he certainly wasn't helping out the cause either until after the resurrection. And that happened after the crucifixion. James wasn't even there at the crucifixion. The only member of the family that we have recorded there is his mother. And usually, if the brothers would be there, James would have been told to take care of his mother, but instead John the apostle was told to do that. And so we don't think that James was even there at Jesus' crucifixion, but he was there to witness the resurrection, and that changed everything for James. And that, as you think that it would. This guy who rejected Jesus at one time, he comes back and he writes this letter to Jewish Christians and fills it with the simple, practical lessons that every Christian needs. And so what we're going to do in our Corona Contrary study is we're going to talk about James first. And who knows how long this could go on, but however long it's going on, I want this to be the place where you can go, where you can see that we're not all going to be doomed. We still have a hope. We still carry on as a Christian. And we're not going to talk about necessarily what we're doing as a Christian in response to the coronavirus, but just how we live our lives as a Christian. I think that's really important. And so here we start off in our study of James 1, 2, and 4. He starts off with the simple message of be happy. But it's a lot more complicated than that, isn't it? Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Now he starts off with this message. I think it's really easy to be happy when we have that security, when we have our good relationships, when we have monetary security. Whenever we're safe, it's really easy to be happy. But when the waters get a little bit too wavy for us, that's whenever we get to be unsettled. We get to be uncomfortable. Now, he doesn't say be happy in good times. I don't think anybody has to be told to be happy in good times. But what he's talking about is the trials. James talks about being happy through the trials, through the unknowns, through tragedy, through unexpected events, through bad relationships, through maybe you're having a problem right now, whether it be internal or external. He says we still be happy through that. But wait, no, he did he? See, he said be joyful. Being happy and being joyful are two completely different things, because he doesn't say be happy through all these trials, because a lot of times when a tragedy hits or when there's a lot of unknowns on the table, it's really hard to be happy. And I don't think we need to think of each other as bad Christians or bad people if we're not happy while we go through a trial, because it's not wrong to not be happy. It's not wrong to be sad. There's a full span of emotions that we can get into. None of these emotions are bad things, no matter if they're way up here with their exuberant joy or if they're way down here with really deep and dark sadness and depression. None of these emotions are sinful. But losing your joy can lead to some sin, right? Having joy through your tragedy, through your unexpected things, is much different than being happy. And so this is what we want to talk about a little bit today. Let's think about it like this. Joy equals hope. What is this hope that we have? We always talk about hope as a Christian, don't we? I know yesterday on our podcast we talked about 3:16 day. 3:16 day. It was John 3:16 is what we dove into, and we talked about Jesus being crucified on the cross and God sending his son and the choices that God and Jesus make along the way because they love us. Whether it would be God's choice of sending his son, even though that he knew that I was going to mess up, that you were going to mess up. No matter the choices that Jesus made to stay on the cross, knowing that we were going to mess up. Those are two things that we can just look at and know, hey, Jesus loves me, and because he loved me so much, I have this hope. Because he defeated death on the cross. That's our hope. Jesus defeated death. If you'll come over, if you've got a Bible with you, you can turn over to 2 Corinthians. And a lot of you can probably quote this verse, but you're better Christians than I am, so I can't quite do that. 2 Corinthians 4, 8 and 9 is what we're going for. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying the body of death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that for the life of Christ we may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. So death is at work in us, but life in you. See, we have this joy because God chose to put his treasure in us, his whole power in us, in these jars of clay. See, that's how we're able to be crushed and perplexed on either side, but we're able to be pressed and afflicted in every way, but we're not able to be crushed. Because we have that hope. We have Jesus Christ inside of us. But when we let these trials that James might be talking about, and I like that he doesn't necessarily say what these trials are, but instead what he does is he kind of goes into just various trials. He doesn't say specifically what these may be. It just says various trials. He doesn't order us to be happy in our trials. He orders us to be joyful in our trials, which I want to equate with hope. He wants us to be hopeful in our trials. Because when we forget who our hope is, when we forget our joy, we don't necessarily operate in the same way, do we? See, we can be sad without being hopeless. We can be sad without being hopeless. We're faced with a bad situation. A family member dies. We have an addiction we can't kick. We have guilt that is just overwhelming us. There's fixes for that one. But there's also things that can't be fixed, There's things that can't be undone. There's circumstances that happen to you that are going to really stink. But, we go through it anyway. But we go through it with the hope. We go through it with joy through our various trials. You see, when we're faced with a bad situation and we don't have our joy in mind, we don't have our hope, we turn to our other crutches. Maybe we pick up an addiction. Maybe we pick up a vice. We take out our anger on other people and we cause this really toxic environment around us. See, when we're going through a bad situation and we don't have our hope where it's supposed to be, we get misplaced completely. I think if we can keep our hope, we can keep our head about us, right? If we keep our eyes on the prize, it doesn't matter what rain's coming down in between us and that prize. See, because when we still have a hope, when we still know that our hope is in Jesus Christ, and we still have that joy within us of being able to know, hey, this world's not my home, we get to know for a fact that we can turn these bad situations into opportunities for Christ. Whenever we're going through this and we know we still have a hope, we turn and submit to God in prayer and in trust. We encourage others around us and make others that wonder why we aren't hopeless. We go through all these different things, right? We go through these various trials and others would think, man, he's supposed to be hopeless. Nobody would blame him if he's hopeless. But no, he doesn't act like that. He or she, they don't act like that because they have Christ in them. Other people will wonder, why aren't they hopeless? Why aren't they just ticked off at the world? But you can say, I have this hope. I have this hope within me, and it's all about Christ. We turn bad situations into opportunities for Christ when we have our hope within us. When we keep our eyes on the hope, we still have Christ. That promise that he gives to us, the promise that he's coming back for us, the promise that we lack nothing and we exemplify Christ whenever we come through like this, because these opportunities, these bad opportunities, what you could call them, bad opportunities, because bad things have happened, negative circumstances have happened. You have every right to be sad and feel every emotion that you're feeling, but how you act changes everything. How you respond to it changes everything. Because we can respond with our hope in mind, with our hope of Jesus Christ in mind, knowing that this world's not our home and it's not our final destination. And that he has put us on a mission and he has put us in a place in heaven. He's reserved that spot for us. And that makes me pretty hopeful. But a lot of times we don't act like it, right? We get really pumped up for that. We get really pumped up for being able to to have that hope, and then we leave the church building and we're like, well, we forget about the hope because we don't act like it sometimes. I know I'm guilty of that, and you might be too. But the more we think about that hope, the more we think about that joy within us and the reason for that joy, it changes everything, doesn't it? You see, it says back here in 2 Corinthians 4, it says death is at work because Satan's here. Satan's here to cause death, right? He's here to cause sadness. He's here to steal your joy, to take your hope away, to take your life away. But you have a joy, you have a hope, you have a promise within you that keeps you away from that. So death is at work, but life is in you through Jesus Christ. Life is in you through Jesus Christ because we still have that hope that makes us turn bad things into opportunities for Christ. Look, that's all we got today. We do have a few discussion questions if you're tuning in with your family, if you are looking at this from the Facebook page, and this is a pre-recorded message. We do have a few discussion questions for you to go over with your family or with your spouse or whoever you're with. The questions is, how do you act when you do have Christ in mind versus when we don't have Christ in mind? I went into that a little bit. For me, it was act like a nut whenever I don't have Christ in mind, because I might react the way that I would initially react. I might just go with the first impulse. I might snap at somebody, or I might get in a bad mood and just stay there. And when I do have Christ in mind, that all changes. I have a different way about me. I might still be sad. I might still be a little bit angry. But the way, whenever I act like I have Christ in my life, I don't make a toxic environment around me. I'd love to hear your answers. I'd love for you to comment. I'd love for you to message your answers in. It might bring me some encouragement, and we can even share them if that's what you'd like. And the second question that we want to talk with our families about is Christianity a manual of life, like a set of instructions, a good set of stories, or is it a lifestyle or a mindset? We a lot of times we act on different sets of things. Sometimes we say, well, this is just a set of instructions for me. If I don't go by it, I'll still get there, right? And then sometimes we say, well, it's a really good set of stories, and we like to talk about the stories. But until we start living it, like if it's a lifestyle and it's a mindset, a lot of things don't change. And so those are our two questions for you to go over with your family. I hope that you've enjoyed our study of James. We're going to be coming back to it periodically on our Corona Contrary study. If you're joining us on our podcast, I apologize for that delay at the very front end. I was trying to get the audio stuff set up, and I'm not very good at this just yet. So if you're on with our live, we'd love to hear from you. And if you ever have any questions, if you ever have any concerns with the media content that's being put out, you can always feel free to email me at harris@hilldalecc.org. DM or PM any of our social media outlets. I'd love to hear from you. If you ever have a prayer request or need help with anything, the same contact information applies. I'm always here. Thank you all so much. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, if that's what you're listening on, then give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good day.